In this video, I'd like to tell you about lipoproteins. Lipoproteins are simply packages that carry around fat. Now, there are various kinds of packages, and each have very important implications for our health. So let's get started. As you already know, fat can be used for many things in your body. But in order for your body to use fat, you must be able to transport fat around your body. You also know that fats hate water, so we can't simply let them float along freely in our bloodstream in most cases. Instead, we have to put them inside of specialized packages or lipoproteins that protect them from water, carry them wherever we need them in our body, and protect them. These specialized packages, called lipoproteins, are called that because lipo stands for fat and proteins stand for protein. And that's what they're made of. Fats mainly in the interior and the phospholipids on the exterior, and then proteins, these little red circles throughout the particle there. So when you eat a meal, you often get lots of fat in that meal, which all has to be absorbed at one time. This means that a huge amount of fat has to be transported from your small intestine to the rest of your body. In order to do that, we're going to need a large lipoprotein. The lipoprotein for the job is called a chylomicron, and I'd like to think of the chylomicron as a giant bus which carries fat. I think of it that way because it has to transport so much fat at one time. Basically, all the fat gets put on this chylomicron bus in your intestines. The bus then enters into the lymph and then into the blood. From the blood, the bus drops off the fat at various places around your body. And when it's done dropping off fat, it ends its route at the liver, where the bus itself gets broken down and disassembled and turned into other things. Now let's say it's been several hours since you've eaten your last meal. Parts of your body are still going to need fat, but we don't need a big giant bus anymore. We just need to drop off and pick up small amounts of fat to various places in your body. So we need smaller lipoprotein packages to deliver the fat to and from your liver. So I like to think of these smaller packages as little taxi cabs. And the taxi cabs are able to simply drop off and pick up smaller amounts of fat from the body into the liver. There are three of these smaller lipoproteins I'd like you to be familiar with. There is VLDL, LDL, and HDL. The definitions are right here for you. Very low density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein, and high density lipoprotein. Remember, all three of these are simply small packages that carry around fat. The top two, VLDL and LDL, drop off fat from the liver to the rest of the body. The HDL is in charge of picking up fat from your arteries and other places in the body and returning it back to the liver. Let's look at the picture of the chylomicron bus and the smaller taxicab lipoproteins. Here they are. The chylomicron is this big giant blue ball represented here on the left. That's the chylomicron. The VLDL is here. The yellow colored balls here. The LVL is the green colored circles here. And the HDL is the smallest particle, the little red balls represented there. Can you see why I use the analogy of a bus compared to smaller taxicabs? The size difference is mainly due to how much fat each of these particles is carrying. Notice next the graph bar here on the right. This tells you what each of the particles contain, what's inside of them. You might think, who cares what's inside of them? But it turns out that each particle contains different things, and if they're the right size and the right shape, they actually get stuck in your arteries and clog them. And most all of us care about that. So what is this chylomicron mainly filled with? You see this yellow color? It's mainly filled with triglyceride, which makes sense because most of the fat in your diet is the form of triglyceride. VLDL, same thing, most of it is filled with triglyceride. However, LDL is filled with mainly what represented by this green bar here? That's right, it's mostly filled with cholesterol. So if you've ever heard someone say LDL is the bad cholesterol, have you heard that before? The reason they say that is this LDL is the right size and the right shape to get stuck in our arteries. And when it gets stuck, the cholesterol inside of it begins to break down, and it causes the formation of fatty streaks and eventually plaque, which is the term for the fat deposits in the arteries. These can cause narrowing of our arteries and eventually heart attacks or strokes, and we don't want that, so we want to limit how much of these LDLs are floating around in our bloodstream. How do we do that? We eat less saturated fat, less cholesterol, and we eat more fibrous foods and things like that. So basically, a healthy diet. Lastly, let's look at the HDL over here, again in the bar graph. This tiny lipoprotein is mostly empty. It's mostly made of protein. And the reason is the job of HDL is to go pick up fat from the rest of the body, including our arteries, and bring it back to the liver for further metabolism. So therefore, it starts out pretty much empty, and then goes out and fills itself up. Now you might have heard people refer to HDL as the good cholesterol. This is because it's the one particle that can go out and pick up that cholesterol from our arteries and clean us out. And this is a really good thing because we don't want fat hanging out in our arteries. We would like our HDL levels to be as high as we could possibly get them, and we do that by exercising and eating a healthy diet. Now, HDL is heavily influenced by our genetics, but research has shown that diet and exercise really can affect HDL in most cases, at least to some extent. So to summarize, the LDL is the bad cholesterol because it's filled with cholesterol and it tends to get stuck in our arteries, and HDL is the good cholesterol because it goes and picks up cholesterol from our arteries and returns it back to the liver. Really, it would be more accurate to call these the bad lipoprotein and the good lipoprotein, but I think you get the point. So that's the basics of lipoproteins.